quit my six-figure job. Who does that? The first 2 months, I was making so many mistakes, like obvious things.
How much did you raise and how long did it take you?
In total, we raised. My name is Gary. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tangent, and we are an employee referral platform that makes referrals accessible to everyone and not just a privileged few with the best networks. So you're at least 9 times more likely to get hired if you're referred. 82% of companies rank it as their best hiring channel, which is amazing if you have the professional networks. But if you come from a kind of a low socioeconomic background like I do, right? So I grew up low income, single parent family. You can have all the talent and potential in the world, but chances are you don't know people that work at LinkedIn, where I used to work, or Google, or Meta, or Amazon. So you can never get referred, and that affects your career outcomes, right? Just by consequence of like your background. And so Tangent exists to solve that by connecting job seekers from this background, which is 63% of the population, it's by far most people, to employees within these companies who can refer them in.
So what was like the specific inspiration that spurred you like, yes, I'm going to start this company? Was there like a particular thing that happened to you?
I wouldn't say it was one particular moment, probably a collection of quite a few different ones. So the first one would have started when I was working at LinkedIn. So I had to hustle to get into LinkedIn, right? I went on LinkedIn and I messaged someone who knew someone that worked there, and they connected with me, and it was a long, like, months process to get hired and eventually start on their graduate program. But when I actually did get there, and I had to move from London to Dublin, that's where the graduate program was based, I started to talk to other of my colleagues, and the conversation of how did you get hired just kind of pops up. And I started hearing that people were like saying I got referred. My friend referred me, and I had no idea what a referral was, an employee referral was. I thought that the only way you could get a job is if you apply for one on a job board, right? And after time, I realized that actually a large majority or a good portion of people at LinkedIn, and actually in tech companies in general, are getting referred. We spoke to one company where 65% of their global hiring comes from referrals. Like, good luck getting into that company if you don't know someone who works there. And so I realized this, and I started to see that it's great for the people that are in those networks, but if you come from my background, like, this is totally unfair. Like, you just, for no reason, like no fault of your own, you're not getting into these companies oftentimes because you just don't know the right people. And so that kind of observation at LinkedIn was something that I'd always took with me as I was kind of looking and exploring different ideas. After LinkedIn, though, I moved and worked at the British Council, where I was leading social mobility programs. Effectively, we were kind of supporting low-income university students and graduates and helping them with their career. And once after they'd done our programs, we would evaluate them or review them and ask them what they'd like to see more from us. And everyone would oftentimes say, networking, we want to meet more people. And so the ideas were percolating from my time at LinkedIn, realizing that there was this huge kind of hiring channel, the best one that was purely based on nepotism, basically, who you know. And then working at the British Council with people in mass from backgrounds like mine, and the only thing they really wanted was like connections and networks and people. It was just percolating on ideas on what could actually solve this challenge, which is all centered around human connection. And then we kind of landed on Tangent.
From the moment that you were going to start the business, did you know that you were always going to raise money, or was there like a turning point where you realized, oh my gosh, we need to raise funding to get this business to the next level, to get it to the masses?
Yeah, so I'm here to create a once in a generation outlier business. Quite frankly, because the world needs it. I've thought about if the world will be what I believe it should be, which is a lot more equitable, a lot more fair, where your background doesn't determine your life outcomes, because quite frankly, right now it does. A company that does 5 million in revenue, 10 million in revenue is just not going to have that much of a dynamic shift on the world as I believe it or I can have. So if I really want to create that once in a generation company that really shifts the needle, changes things, right? It has to be a moonshot. By natural consequence, it has to be like a multi-billion-dollar business. Just because I want it, not because I just want to have that number, because the change in the world that we will create will unlock that number of economic value. And so to get onto that journey, it was almost inevitable that I would have to fundraise to give us the capital and, quite frankly, the time to get things right and get us on that journey of building Tangent. So yeah, from early on, I was always quite clear that we would have to raise, and we have.
So did you at any point ever put any of your personal savings into it, any form of bootstrapping, or that you just went straight into fundraising?
Yeah, so I haven't. So a bit of context on Tangent. So we were actually incubated through a venture builder, a company called Zinc VC. I actually really have a lot of value and time for companies like Zinc VC or other types of venture builders because I find and I believe they actually kind of de-risk a lot of the challenging parts of starting a business in the sense that what Zinc does is they recruit individuals from around the world to join their entrepreneurial program. You find a co-founder on this program. They pay you a monthly stipend, around £2,000 a month, which for a lot of people that is the challenge of starting a business is having that initial capital to take the risk. And so I joined Zinc, and they provided me, they gave me capital to find a co-founder to start experimenting with ideas and the network around that to do that. And so because I started on Zinc, and then once we were invited to join their portfolio, they put an initial bit of money into us. We never had to put in our own money because we were always backed.
You always hear journeys of bootstrapping and then fundraising, so it's quite inspiring to hear that there are different ways to go into business, and as long as you have an idea that's going to change the world, you can still get funded. I love that. The big question is, how much did you raise and how long did it take you?
Sure. So in total, we raised $1.1 million. And from start to finish getting all our commitments, it took us 4 months, which felt like forever, PTSD. But I think particularly we were fundraising in 2023, which was a challenging market. It wasn't objectively the longest amount of time.
4 months is insane. When I speak to a lot of startups, I hear figures from 6 months to 12 months. I think I've even heard 2 years.
Oh, wow.
A fundraising journey of 2 years. So I'm really curious to know, how are you able to achieve such a large amount of money in such a short space of time?
Ooh, loaded question. There's a lot in that. So there's two things I would say it comes down to. One is it's more within people's control, and then the other is less so. So one is that when it comes to fundraising, for better or for worse, the name of the game is who you know and not what you know, and also how similar are you to me. So when I look at our cap table, none of our investors, or all of our investors, I either knew previously from previous jobs or just networks, or I met for a warm introduction. Like no one came cold, and I did try that, to be honest. So it's a harsh kind of reality, but it is the reality that that just having that. There's a level of trust, I think, on the warm introduction front where someone says, I'm investing or I know this person, I think you should have a conversation with them. That holds a lot of value, particularly at early stage where there isn't much. We had an MVP, we had users, and we had members, and we had some sales, but still, it's not really anything there. But I think that helped. Somehow I broke into networks of influence and privilege, and I can speak when I'm in that room. And then it it was a domino effect from there. The other thing which helped fundraise, I think fundraise quickly, was my story and the connection and the story around myself and how it fits with what we're building. So you'll know that Tangent is very much focused on social mobility and so forth. When I look at when I reflect back on the fundraising journey that we had, I was having calls with quite incredible people, people that were unicorn founders, members in the House of Lords, and they would all commit after maybe one meeting. I reflected on my my pitch, and I think these three things helped me get investment quicker. One was demonstrating a connection to the problem, a commitment to the problem, and then demonstrating my brilliance. And what I'll do right now is I'll give a very high-level overview of my pitch to bring that to life, right? So I'd start the call and say, hi, I'm Gary. I'll start from the very beginning. I grew up low income in a single-parent family. But since then, I've gone through an upwardly mobile journey. I got into my first choice university with a scholarship. I started my career at LinkedIn, rolled off their graduate program into the sales team where I was one of the top sales reps. Actually became the first sales rep in LinkedIn history to ever hit a quarterly target just with multi-year contracts. At the end of my 3.5 years there, though, I wanted to have more of an impactful career, so I quit my six-figure job, took an 80% salary reduction and moved to the British Council to lead social mobility programs. Whilst I was there, I created my own social mobility podcast that was featured in the media. It won an award from McKinsey and Company, and it's boosted my personal brand. I do lots of talks in it, most notably at the Oxford Union. So that's a high-level overview of my pitch, and the three things that I mentioned are in that story, right? Connection to the problem. Grew up low-income, single-parent family. He knows these problems. He's scratching his own itch. commitment to the problem. He was earning all this money at LinkedIn, one of the best tech companies in the world, and he quit his 6-figure job, 80% salary reduction to go lead social mobility programs in the public sector. Who does that? Commitment. He's taken risk already. And then the demonstrated brilliance, right? So he was the first sales rep in LinkedIn history to hit this create this record. He had a social mobility podcast, that won awards, and he's done talks at the Oxford Union. Most people don't do that, right? Those three things together, I think, gave people confidence that if anyone's going to build a big business in this space, it's Gary. And so those are the two things I think that really helped us fundraise in that time. It was getting the connections and network really, which is difficult for some people because you mightn't have them. And I understand that. That's something I'm always thinking about. How can I help others get those networks? But the other was the story and the connection, like the why me for what we're building.
It sounds like you have such a compelling story, and I guess you also use that to build your relationships. Would you say that having these two things, did it make the journey easy? So was the fundraising journey, was it difficult? Was it stressful? How would you describe it?
Yeah, fundraising is hard, like full stop. It's hard, and I think it's hard for everyone. But fundraising is also possible, right? I definitely think when I look at our fundraising journey as well, it was 4 months, but the first 2 months I was own goaling, right? Making so many mistakes, like obvious things that I look back and think, how did I say that? How did I not have that piece of data to back up what we're saying? What I think is really important is having a quick pace of learning on the mistakes that you're making. It was tough, it was challenging. There were days where, I'd look at my calendar the week ahead and I'd be like, there's no calls in, or I've got all these calls and I don't feel prepared. It's going to be hard, that's just inevitable. But I think the resilience piece is important and just making sure you're having a quick pace of learning on the feedback you're getting when people are passing and executing on them very quickly so that the next call that you have with another investor, you are well prepared. And so after that first 2 months of just making so many mistakes, when I was in the latter 2 months, I was so much more prepared that when I was going into calls, I had a lot more confidence that people would commit.
If you were to describe your fundraising journey in one word, what word would you use?
It's an interesting question. One word. I have to think about it because like a million words are flying into my head right now. I don't know if this is the exact word, but I'll say it and then I'll explain it. I'd say it was quite enlightening in the sense that it taught me a lot about myself and how capable I am. It wasn't easy, it was tough, and you just have to keep on going. But it also taught me a lot about what it takes to fundraise, and it's not just how good your idea is or how credentialed you are. There are so many things that sit outside of you that will determine your fundraise success. And I think a lot of it does come down to the networks that you have. So now when I see a fundraising announcement from another company, which previously would have made me feel like, oh, why can't I do that? Oh, I want to do that, etc. Now I'm a bit more, investigative on that, in the sense that, who did they know, in those funds? Did they work at those funds before? A lot of the stuff you see, people are raising big rounds, with maybe not much traction or whatever, they have the insider scoop, they know particular people. So I just learned a lot about the whole fundraising landscape. Also a lot about myself that it was an enlightening experience.
What would you say that you were most proud of during the fundraising journey?
Most proud of during the fundraising journey, I think it's the cap table that we have. We have really, really impressive investors. Investors who are, have scaled businesses from, millions of pounds to billions of pounds. Unicorn founders, really prominent people in industry, but also just general society that have, looked at myself, the team, and what we're building and said that this is something that I think has legs. And coming from where I do come from, my kind of humble upbringing to where I am now, I think that's made me proud. And also I think I'm very proud of myself, to be honest. It wasn't easy, and I'm in these foreign spaces, right, with people that they gesticulate differently, they speak differently, they have a whole host of different experiences, but I can find and form connection with them and develop trust and relationships that they can then back with me. I'm pretty good. I'm proud of myself in that respect.
I want to know, how did you find your first angel investor, or how did they find you?
So our first angel investor would have came from an event that Zinc ran. So I have to say, shout out to them. The investor and her husband, I believe, were our first commitment. We didn't really have much, and this was a really cool one because she, at the time, was the first female managing partner at SoftBank. Huge, VC investment company. And yeah, she came to kind of like it's not a demo day, but a demo day-esque event that Zinc kind of run for their portfolio. We connected from there, and then through a conversation, I spoke to her and then her husband. They committed. So through Zinc.
Wow. So, in terms of like when trying to attract an investor, would you say cold emailing or social media or like building in-person relationships? What would you say was like your sweet spot?
In terms of finding new investors, I can only speak from experience. That's the only thing I can do, and I wish it was more inspirational and had more practical advice. But a lot of it did come from warm introductions. I think for us, it was being really intentional of working your investors. So when someone commits, people want to be helpful, but you have to ask for help. So I think if you are, if you struggle with that, like this is not the time. This is the time to work on that. But when you have an investor that's committed, ask them to introduce you to other people. If there's anyone in their network that that could be interested, please do let me know and connecting with them. And when they say yes, make it easy for them to make that connection. So I wouldn't ever have ask someone to write our email for us or anything like that. That's too much work for them. I would always write a personalized email to the person that I want to be introduced to, the background of Tangent and Attraction. I would forward that on to the investor so that they can just easily forward it on to the person that I want to be connected with, and they can just write, are you interested in this? If so, I'll make the connection. If not, no worries. So it was really easy for them to do that. So make it easy for people when you are trying to get those introductions. But in our case, the large majority of our investors did come from warm introductions, or I already knew them. So there was that trust already there. I did try cold. I messaged people cold on LinkedIn. I did get some replies, but didn't convert into any calls, and it didn't obviously convert into any investment.
Apart from money, what impact would you say that angel investors have had on you?
Oh yes, so much impact. When I look at some of the investors we have, one of our investors is, was one of the earliest employees at Deliveroo, who grew them from maybe 50 million in GMV to 6 billion. So he's been great at advising us and supporting us around growth. Another one of our investors was an executive at Farfetch, helped me on my leadership journey. Another one of our investors, as we're in the process of formally and officially announcing our fundraise, is the CEO of a leading top PR and communications firm in London. So he's helping us run our fundraising strategy. It's just so much expertise we find in our investors that we couldn't naturally afford to hire or pay expensive freelancers to work on. We have that free at the top tier with our investors. So there's gaps that we have on the team that are important, but you wouldn't necessarily want to spend right now. We can get that from our investors, which is just truly transformative.
Sounds like you were very strategic. So would you say that founders should be picky with the sort of angel investors that they allow to invest in their business?
I think, and growing that, let's assume it's the CEO that's fundraising. I think the CEO's job, or whoever is fundraising's job, is to get money, right? So wherever way you can get the money, right? But if you do have optionality, if you do have people that, really want to work with, lots of people coming to you, then you want to be thinking strategically around how you can extract value from particular people. What are the gaps in your co-founding team or the initial team that you want to build that you don't necessarily want to hire for because it's not something that you'd have a need for ongoing, but you could get from an angel investor. So yeah, we were, when we were going out fundraising and we were getting one traction, we were quite intentional. People that had experience that we knew we would need that wouldn't require us to then have to hire for.
What advice would you give to a founder who is trying to look for an angel investor?
Well, good question. I think my advice would be to not look for angel investors. Ooh, contrarian, right? So hear me out. I think that oftentimes people want to find investors, and if you are an angel investor, you've got an investor on your LinkedIn, and definitely if you're a prominent one, you're going to be inundated with people that are reaching out to you, pitching you, sending you messages, etc. And so for those people, or just investors in general, it's very difficult to cut through the noise, particularly if you're going out cold. What I would suggest is to not look for angel investors specifically, but look for and try to develop relationships with founders who have recently raised around, let's say within the last year. because founders who have been invested in can act as great bridges to those angel investors, right? It's your chances of getting an introduction or getting connected with an angel investor is much higher if a portfolio company, that an angel has invested in is recommending you to them. Much higher if much higher getting a call in the diary that way than if you're to try and reach out cold. So I would focus on, I'm actually just reflecting on my experience. I have a high conversion of people that I introduce to, and then investors are now, who invested us have taken those calls because that acts as that trusted, kind of connection. So I would be thinking like, don't look at the investors. Find founders who are in your space or who you can form a connection with, develop relationships with them, and when the time is right, ask for them to introduce you to their investors. So that would be my advice.
Through these interviews, I've heard so many different ways, and that is really an interesting way as well. One final question: what is one piece of advice that you'd give to a founder that they didn't ask for?
Didn't ask for. Okay. I would say, don't seek to be right. Seek to learn, and to learn quickly. So if you're building something that's truly disruptive, like groundbreaking, a once in a generation company, if that's the case, there is no playbook, right? You are figuring it out yourself, and that's like really, really hard. Like I'm doing it now, it's tough. But the best way to do that I've learned is to have a really experimental, curious, and discovery mindset, right? Which requires, and that having that mindset will allow you to learn how to build that playbook quickly. If you seek to be right all the time, you're maybe stunting your mindset of all the learnings that could be around you, and it won't motivate you to take as many risks, to try as many different things. If you optimize for learning and learning quickly and then applying those learnings to different tests and experiments you can run to figure out how to build that playbook for that disruptive business, you'll get there much quicker. So don't seek to be right. I think it feels like that's the right thing to do, that everything you should do should work. Don't be precious of your experiments, your tests, your hypotheses. Just try different things, learn quickly and apply that.